A father hasn't seen his son in 4 years. When they finally sit down together, he doesn't go alone. He brings his wife into the room, not for comfort, not for company. To watch. To remember exactly what gets said. That's not how families usually greet each other after 4 years apart. That's how you prepare for a meeting you don't fully trust. Highgrove House sits quiet most of the year, tucked into the Gloucestershire countryside, the kind of place built for privacy rather than performance. On July 10th, that privacy got tested. Earlier that same day, Harry had been in Birmingham, taking part in a wheelchair rugby session at an event marking 1 year until the Invictus Games returned to the city. From there, he made his way to his father's estate, where Charles and Camilla opened the door to him, to Meghan, and to 2 kids most of the public hasn't seen up close in years, Archie, now 7, and Lilibet, 5. No cameras. No statement beforehand. Buckingham Palace only confirmed it after the fact, in the fewest words possible. The King and Queen welcomed the Sussex family to Highgrove. That's it. That's the whole official record. For a family that used to announce christenings with full portrait sittings, this was the opposite. A meeting designed to leave as little trace as possible. And that alone tells you something. This wasn't a reunion. It was a negotiation dressed up as one. So why bring Camilla at all? According to royal writer Robert Jobson, it wasn't sentiment. It was strategy. The Queen was there, he said, to make sure everything that happened in that room was witnessed. Not comforted. Not welcomed. Witnessed. That word alone changes the whole picture of what this meeting actually was. And Jobson wasn't the only one saying it. Royal biographer Sally Bedell Smith claims this wasn't even the first time Camilla played this exact role. She reportedly did the same thing back in February 2024, when Harry flew in right after Charles's cancer diagnosis became public, another meeting where the stakes were high and the trust was low. If that's accurate, it means this wasn't a one-time precaution. It was a pattern. A king who won't be alone in a room with his own son. Not once, but apparently every time it counts. And once you know that, the question isn't why Camilla showed up. It's what exactly Charles thinks could happen if she doesn't. This didn't start with Charles. Queen Elizabeth II ran the same playbook long before her son ever needed it. Reports say she refused to take Harry's phone calls unless an aide was sitting in the room with her, not a private word allowed, even between grandmother and grandson. And it went further than phone calls. When the Sussexes wanted a photographer at one of their last visits with her, she said no. That meant no photo of her meeting Lilibet, her own great-great-granddaughter and namesake, now 5 years old. A moment that exists nowhere except in memory. 2 generations of the same family, running the same defense. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If the late Queen needed protection from her own grandson's version of events, and her son is doing the exact same thing now, what does that say about how much the Windsors actually trust Harry with the truth? Here's what complicates the picture. Charles is 77. And has been living with cancer since 2024, treatment ongoing, no clear end date given to the public. Jobson put it plainly. Despite everything, despite the memoir, despite the interviews, Charles agreed to this meeting so that he'd have no regrets. One broadcaster close to royal circles, Helena Chard, put it a different way. She said Charles has always hoped to see his grandchildren, and that with everything he's facing, family matters more to him now than it ever has. That's not the language of a man protecting an image. That's the language of a man doing the math on time. And that's what makes this so strange to sit with. A king who's sick enough to be thinking about regret still won't sit down with his own son without a witness in the room. 2 things are true at once here. He wants this relationship badly enough to override years of hurt, and he still doesn't trust it enough to be alone in it. That's not contradiction. That's exactly what it looks like when love and self-preservation are fighting for the same seat. The terms weren't casual. No photographs. Nothing posted anywhere online. No advance leaks to press, not even a hint this was coming until it was already happening. And afterward, almost nothing. A brief confirmation from the palace, and silence on everything else. Even the scheduling had the feel of a covert operation. Camilla was reportedly told at the last minute and had to make her way over separately to be there in time. Nothing about this was planned weeks in advance, the way royal engagements usually are. And notice who wasn't in that room. William. Kate. Neither one showed up, and neither one has been seen anywhere near Harry since their grandmother's funeral back in 2022. Royal editor Roya Nicker wrote that William likely won't be pleased about his father extending an olive branch to the Sussexes at all. She pointed out that while William rarely brings Harry up in royal circles anymore, the sense of betrayal over his brother's departure, and everything Harry said publicly afterward, still stings. So while one relationship in this family took a cautious step forward, another one stayed exactly where it's been for 4 years, frozen. Charles may be ready to try. His eldest son clearly isn't. To understand why a witness felt necessary at all, you have to go back to what Harry's actually said publicly since stepping away. It started with the Oprah interview in 2021, allegations about the family that the world had never heard aired that directly. Then came the Netflix docuseries in 2022, more of the same, this time with cameras rolling on his own terms. And then Spare in 2023, the memoir that left almost nothing out. One claim in particular still sits heavy with Camilla specifically. Harry wrote that she sacrificed him, trading private family information with tabloid journalists to smooth her own path toward becoming queen consort. That's Harry's account, not a confirmed fact, and it's never been proven. But it explains everything about why Camilla, of all people, needed to be the one in that room. If you believe you were traded for headlines once, you don't walk into a private room with that person again without someone else watching. This meeting didn't happen in isolation, it came at the tail end of a genuinely rough stretch for Harry. Days earlier, he'd lost his privacy lawsuit against Associated Newspapers, a legal fight he'd pushed hard on for years. On top of that, he was reportedly turned away from staying at Buckingham Palace during this same UK trip, no room offered, despite being back in his home country. It wasn't the first setback tied to his standing back home, either. Back in 2025, he lost an appeal over the British government's decision to strip back his publicly funded security, a ruling that's kept him relying on privately funded protection ever since, part of the reason he's stayed hesitant about bringing his family to the UK at all. And yet, in the middle of all that, he still pulled off getting Meghan and the kids over from their home in Portugal, past every one of those security concerns that usually keep them away. So this wasn't a relaxed family visit squeezed in between vacations. It was a man who'd just been publicly knocked down more than once, still fighting to get his wife and children in front of his father anyway. Whatever else this meeting was, it clearly mattered enough to push through. A few days later, at the Time 100 gala, Harry didn't know he was being overheard. No cameras, no interview, just a casual conversation with a guest, and what came out was almost jarringly normal. He said his father was doing great. He said Meghan and the kids were happy to be back home in California. And then, the line that stood out most, the kids are growing like weeds. That's not the language of someone who just walked out of a heavily guarded, witness-required meeting with a father he's publicly accused of betrayal. That's the language of an ordinary phone call to a friend. Which leaves you with two versions sitting side by side, the version built on legal terms, secrecy, and a witness in the room, and the version Harry casually described afterward like nothing complicated happened at all. Only one of those versions was ever meant for the public to hear. So which version is real? The guarded meeting that needed a witness, or the easy conversation Harry described afterward like it was nothing? Maybe both are. Maybe that's what this family has actually become, people who need protection from each other and still want each other in the room anyway. Charles didn't have to agree to this meeting. He's sick, he's tired, and he had every reason left to say no. He said yes anyway, just not without backup. That's not really a reunion story. It's a story about what's left when love and trust stop being the same thing. Whether Harry and Meghan ever tell the world what actually happened inside that room, that part, for now, only they get to decide.